Hello, you're very welcome back to the Matchbook Betting Podcast, and it's the Weekend Football Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as usual this week by Miguel Delaney and Mark O'Haire. Adrian will be back with us next week. Before we get into some of the games we're covering and a lot of the midweek action and plenty of talking points, we do want to point you towards Safer Gambling Week. So all this week across the industry is Safer Gambling Week. It runs from the 17th of October to the 23rd of October, and all the details in terms of finding tools, etc., safergamblinguk.org. We don't just want this to be, like we cover at the top of the podcast. We do want to put a bit of real behind it. And I know, Mark, you want to speak a little bit just about Safer Gambling Week and for people to keep fun at the forefront of their bet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a very, very big believer in keeping betting fun at all levels, really. And obviously, all the lessons we learn at the beginning of gambling tend to apply in everyday betting, really. Don't bet beyond your means, bet what you can afford to lose. And try and put aside a specific betting balance that you can gamble with and be disciplined. They're the fundamentals, really. Never chase your losses. We know all the stories and what we're supposed to be doing, but I'm still a big advocate of trying to keep the journey, the process enjoyable, keep the enjoyment at the forefront of what we're doing. If that's researching your bets, trying to identify where the value might be, but also to see those bets unfold as well. And I love the thrill personally to see my bets play out, and I do put more emphasis on the bets that are probably more fun to enjoy to watch as well. I think that's something we need to sort of be aware of, really. We're always told about being very careful with our betting, but I think it's very important just to remember that there is an enjoyment side to things. And rather than going to the cinema on a Friday night and watching the latest movie, I'm quite happy to sit in and watch whatever live game is on that weekend and put a little bet on and just enjoy myself that way. So yeah, I mean, whether it's Ivan Toney to score first on a Friday night when you're watching Brentford against Brighton, and I've got a huge amount of opinion on where the game might go, or if you've got something more substantial, it doesn't really matter, really. I think betting is supposed to be fun and an entertainment purpose at the end of the day. And if we can try and win a few quid along the way, then absolutely brilliant to be involved in the game that way. But there obviously are dangers to be aware of. But I think sometimes this industry, we need to be aware of the positive stories too, and there's plenty of them if you can find a few winners along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with our Matchbook Meets conversation we had a few months back, Mark, that really resonated with me, keeping fun at the forefront of it. And as I touched on the show on Monday, betting should add and enhance the viewing experience, not take over it for people. So as I mentioned, the tools again, safergamblinguk.org, a lot of tools there online, and you can catch, there's a lot of videos and pictures we're putting up throughout all our social channels this week. Before we touch on the four games we're gonna preview, if you are watching our content, do give us a thumbs up on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. And we would appreciate a 5-star review and wherever you're listening on your preferred podcast platform. There was so much midweek action, guys, but I think we'll cover it with these four games. We'll get straight into it. The four games we are covering: Chelsea at home to Manchester United, Everton at home to Crystal Palace, Southampton at home to Arsenal, and Tottenham Hotspur versus Newcastle United. We'll do European bets and our best bets as well. So let's kick it off and get straight into it. Chelsea versus Manchester United, and let's take a look at the betting currently as we have it on matchbook.com. This is a 5:30 Saturday game. Chelsea can be backed at 2.16, United 3.7. The draw is available at 3.65. Both teams to score, yes, 1.76. No is 2.24. And the handicap sees United get a quarter of a goal head start at 2.12. The goal line is set at 2.5. So, Miguel, straight to you. You were at Brentford versus Chelsea last night. I guess United Tottenham dominated the headline because it was the main TV game. But so tell us a little bit, for those who didn't catch the game, how Graham Potter's Chelsea set up, and how did you find that performance overall?
Well, it was another variation from Potter. This one didn't work as well because it seemed like, and also to be fair, it was a weaker. You would argue it was a weaker first 11, especially maybe giving Broho up front for all his potential, rather than Aubameyang. Sterling didn't start, and then eventually came on at wing back. And for most of the game, essentially until he made changes midway through the second half, Brentford dominated and really put Chelsea under massive pressure with an aerial bombardment. And it was only down to Kepa, the reborn Kepa, that Potter kept another clean sheet, and that was, I think, either his fourth or fifth in a row. But for the first time since he came in, they didn't score, and for the first time since his first match, they also didn't score more than one in a game, whatever, but not scoring at all. And I think that's probably what's influenced my thinking in this game as well. In that we're still in a relatively unknown period of both teams. I was considering going for a low-scoring game, but then kind of what kind of conditions me against that is United. I mean, and again, we've talked so much in the pod about never being guided by the last match, but whether there's arguments over whether they've clicked, and also, of course, that there had been a trend of Chelsea playing nice football and scoring a fair few goals when everyone expected the 1-1 from Potter, and yet I think this game could be set up for precisely that, a 1-1. So I've gone for a draw. I think it's a difficult one to read, difficult one to predict. A lot of potential variability here, but I think almost a draw is the safest. I mean, this fixture maybe has it's very particularly dependent on who the managers have been in charge. So I've been to some wild ones in my time. The first I ever went to was in the Premier League was a 3-2 where Van Persie scored. I think given the way both managers set up, this doesn't have the feel of that sort of a firecracker Chelsea United game.
Yeah, Mark, you're in similar agreements. But just on Miguel's bet there in the draw, I noticed like now and again you do put in the odd draw. So you are looking at that market specifically. Is there anything to target when trying to find a bet that's a good value at draws? Because it could be a minefield for people sometimes. And most people, I guess, would ignore the price, just given that it's probably easier to back either team to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much an untouched kind of option in the 1x2 really, because it's not very sexy, is it, back in the draw? Yeah. But it tends to have about a 1 in 3 opportunity. So that's kind of where you look towards. But if I am backing it, and I'm probably going to, I'm very much in line with what Miguel is saying, and I could easily get behind the draw here again because the price is appealing. And also, there's been a history of draws between these two teams, a history of low-scoring draws, at least recent history between the two teams, which kind of flies in the face of what we've kind of come to expect from matches involving big 6 teams. But last season's 2 meetings ended 1-1. Actually, 6 of the last 8 meetings have gone under 2.5 goals. The last 5 games have all been drawn as well. So you've got a couple of 0-0s in there as well. So draw and under 2.5 goals and are both where I'd be looking towards here. And I think when the goal expectancy is low, or you're expecting a low goal expectancy, at least, that's when the draw absolutely comes into play, because you're looking at the 0-0 and the 1-1. 2-2 and 3-3 are much more unlikely than likely. So I could easily get behind the idea of there being a draw here. I'm going to try and get my excuses in early, but obviously it's a caveat that's worth reiterating. But we're in a really relentless patch of the season at the minute. These teams are playing European football every midweek. This week, obviously, we've got Premier League, and it's back to league football at the weekend. It's relentless at the minute, and I think that punishing schedule is starting to catch up with some teams. We're not seeing the sort of big scorelines we've probably come to expect. You saw Liverpool midweek against West Ham kind of labour towards that victory after their exploits against Man City at the weekend. Obviously, the schedule eats into recovery time, eats into preparation time as well. We've got more European football on the agenda next week, and you have to assume there's going to be a certain sense of rotation. Chelsea did that midweek. Man United probably less so. So I'm interested to see what the team sheets are coming into this weekend. United were very good for a large parts, if not all of the game against Tottenham, who were really, really sort of strangely subdued in that match. But United racked up 28 shots, was 18 in the first half, but a lot of those were from distance as well. They weren't sort of creating clear-cut opportunities too often. Yes, Hugo Lloris had to be called on to make some really good saves. Anthony hit the post as well, or the outside of the post. But United weren't freshening, clear-cut opportunities after clear-cut opportunities. There's a lot of long-range efforts there. And with Chelsea, they are still a work in progress under Graham Potter. And I think if you want to be negative about it, you could say they rode their luck in the first half against Crystal Palace. Absolutely rode their luck against Aston Villa last weekend in the first half. And I think Brentford even had their opportunities to put them under the cosh and probably edged what was quite a low-quality game. And they weren't necessarily pushed hard by Milan over those 2 Champions League games either. So I still feel Chelsea are kind of in second gear at the minute. And United, whilst they are a work in progress and moving in the right direction, I'm not willing to sort of trust them in a big game away from home just yet. Most of their sort of fine performances have come at Old Trafford so far this season. So my wager here was to go with under 2.5 goals, big game, tired legs, eyes possibly elsewhere as well, coming into a hectic period. So I thought the odds against on under 2.5 goals was fair enough. But as I say, if you're going to back an unders game, it brings in the draw as well. So if you want the bigger price, absolutely get on the draw at 365. But yeah, I just guess with under 2.5 goals, you've got a few more sort of correct scores on your side. Either team with a pinch of 1-0 or a 2-0, as well as the 0-0 and 1-1. So just covers you a bit more. And I think the price, kind of odds against quotes, is still reasonable enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I made the mistake of going with the draw for United Tottenham instead of the unders for Miguel. So I don't want to make that same mistake again. So we'll lock in under 2.5 at 2.02. But anyone who wants to bet on the match odds, we all know what's going to happen now. It's going to be a draw.
I went draw, didn't I? Miguel went under 2.5 goals midweek, and now this time we reversed it again.
Yeah. So I have a sneaking suspicion it's going to be the draw. So officially we'll lock in under 2.5 goals. As I learned watching the game last night, it's probably a safer bet than the draw. But the draw does bring in as I said, and if you can get away with it with a high scoring game. So we'll lock that in. Big game for 5:30 Saturday. We'll move on to the second game. We're sticking with the Saturday program. So it's a 3:00 kickoff, Everton versus Crystal Palace. We'll go to you first on this, Mark, but let's take a look at the betting currently as we have it on matchbook.com. Everton can be backed at 2.68, Crystal Palace 3.0. The draw is available at 3.3. Both teams to score yes is 1.95, no is 2.0. And the handicap draw no bet is Everton 1.88 favoured in that market. And the total is 2.25 goals. So yeah, Mark, you wanted to talk about this game and where are you kind of thinking in terms of a bet here?
I wanted to oppose Everton and the market's already started moving against them after what was another dreadful display, shall we say, it being kind at St James's Park in midweek. They had one shot away at Newcastle, were totally outplayed for almost all of that match. And I know there's obviously a bit of respect around Everton's name when they play at Goodison Park. Under Frank Lampard, they're returning a 1.5 points per game average at home, which is very reasonable for a team you consider to be sort of bottom six material. But the overall picture this season has been pretty bleak, despite where they are in terms of the league table. They've won once. They've scored, is it one? I think they've won twice. They've scored multiple goals once. They're averaging sort of 0.75 goals per game. They're second bottom in expected points, second bottom on expected goals process. Their shot ratio is dreadful. I just can't be backing them kind of at these kind of prices. And I think Crystal Palace, despite not being at the very best so far this season, came under some, I think, fairly unfair criticism from their own supporters for the way in which they've started the season. They've had a very difficult schedule, and yes, their performance against Leicester and Leeds wasn't entirely convincing, but I think the come behind win against Wolves will do them the world of good. They don't win many matches, but they are very, very capable and very, very competitive. And if you look at their record last season, they lost just 6 times under Vieira in the Premier League against teams outside of the Big Six. This season, their defeats have come against Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City, all of course Big Six teams. So I expect Palace to get something out of this game. I think they're more than good enough to do so. Defensively, there have been a few question marks about their performances, but going forward, I've got no doubts that there's ability in that team and players of invention who can create and obviously convert opportunities too. And I can't really say the same about Everton. I know Calvert-Lewin came back into the team, but he still feels like he's a little bit rusty. Anthony Gordon's going around like a headless chicken, picking up yellow cards here, there and everywhere. And I just think Palace are the more settled unit right now. So, yeah, I wouldn't put anyone off kind of backing them. Draw no bets, 2.1. But I'm going to be slightly more cautious. Back Palace plus a quarter, which is around 1.75, 1.76. Just means if the game does end all square, we still make a half stakes win. So we're effectively making profit as long as Palace don't lose. I would be surprised if we lost to Everton, even if I know that Goodison Park is where we tend to get the best Everton teams, but at the minute, I just can't see it. They're not creating enough. They're not doing enough in the final third. And I think defensively, Jordan Pickford's been a huge kind of outlier for them.
Yeah, and you touched on their underlying numbers not being that good a few weeks ago when Everton were on that good run of form. Miguel, since we spoke about Everton on the podcast, they've had a dreadful, really, 3 or 4 performances. United at home sticks out to me. And Tottenham away, they were good for maybe 55 minutes. Where are you at with Frank Lampard's Everton? I guess it's a critical next few games ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think we spoke before, but I mean, I've always been a Lampard skeptic, I have to say. But it had seemed like one of the things that was working for him at Everton was that he was kind of syncing with the kind of culture of defiance that's grown at Everton in the last few years. Basically, I suppose they're not Liverpool. They've had difficulties, and I know for all I know the supporters would talk about the school of science and what the club have traditionally played. it sometimes felt. I mean, the old dogs of war, which something else that used to be said of Everton, is a bit more fitting at the moment where they currently are, where it's not a team kind of looking to get into the Champions League in the way it was under Martinez. I suppose it was a bit different under Moyes, to be fair, but the way that Lampard has played has kind of tapped into that. I think it's obviously been, he's gone more extreme with it when they've been in trouble, which is exactly how to describe these few games. So it's why I expect an absolute dog of a game here. I think they're especially conscious of the attacking players that Palace have, and that real trickery Palace have got, and on the scoring form Zaha has been in, getting the goal the other night again. This almost would have been one where I would have gone for like under 1.5 goals, but I've gone for both teams to score no, because I think it'll be a 0-0 or a 1-0. And I suppose that does allow us, if one of them scores once and then they can hit on the break, or Palace get a little bit of a rhythm against an Everton that are probably, you might think now, they could be a little bit susceptible to a few collapses if this form gets worse. And it all depends, I suppose, on keeping tight and not conceding an early goal.
Yeah, it's definitely set up for one of those cagey games. Massive game for Everton. I do like Mark's pick on Palace plus a quarter of a goal at 1.76. We'll lock that in. I do think Everton will probably struggle to break Crystal Palace down, so that could be a good bet for us. We'll move on to the third game, which is the Sunday football, and Southampton versus Arsenal. Let's take a look at the betting firstly, as we have it at matchbook.com. Southampton currently available at 6.4. Arsenal are 1.61. The draw is available at 4.3. Both teams to score yes is 1.75. No is 2.1. Southampton are getting a 1 goal head start on the Asian handicap line at 1.89. And the total is 2.5 goals, a good bit shaded towards the over there. Now, I'm conscious that Arsenal are in Europa League action, that a lot of those margins will tighten up there, Mark, and it is difficult to speak about a team when they have another game coming up against Ruben van Nistelrooy's PSV. But where are you at with Arsenal currently and going into this game? Is this another banana skin similar to Leeds last week post Europa League?
Is that to me?
Yeah, Mark. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm positive about Arsenal. I know St Mary's has been a bit of a bogey ground for them in recent seasons. I think they've lost 3 of the last 5 trips and failed to win any of those games actually away at Southampton. But I am pro Arsenal, and I think it's hard not to be. I think the performance at Ellen Road last week might have been a bit of a wake-up call and might be a catalyst to try and improve standards again. I've been impressed by what they've done away from home, which has always been the Achilles heel of Arsenal in years gone by. They've already been to Leeds, Palace and Brentford. They've already won all those trips without conceding a goal, include Bournemouth in that as well. They've been there and won without conceding. Just 3 goals against all season, all of which came away at Old Trafford. So yeah, I think they were competitive and good for a good hour of that game as well. So they're only behind City in terms of the major metrics that you look towards in terms of performance data indicators, which suggest again that their season hasn't been a fluke at all. They're playing very well. They may have slightly overperformed, but they're very much in command in what they're achieving at the minute. And I think the PSV game could be a slight distraction, but Southampton had their own sort of midweek involvement, going to Bournemouth, getting a win, scoring early, and then almost downing tools and just inviting pressure on for the rest of the match. Really, it was a strange kind of performance, and Ralph Hasenhüttl's come in for much more criticism from his own supporters for his tactical decisions in that game and his substitutions. And Saints, a team I mentioned before the midweek program, that I just can't place them very well right now. I'm still struggling to kind of work out what the aim is, what they're trying to achieve, and how they're going to get there. And I think the injury to Bella Kotchap is significant. So defensively, I think they're missing a key man. Going forward, I don't really rate them as terms of a kind of consistent output. I don't think you're going to get that from Saints. So, the midweek was their only clean sheet so far this season. So, yes, St Mary's, that tends to be where we get the best of Southampton. They beat Chelsea here. They gave United a really good test despite losing. Last year, they only lost twice at home to the Big Six, and only one of those games was by a margin of 2 goals or more. But so, yeah, they probably do relish their role as underdogs. But I just think Arsenal are in such a groove right now that it's difficult to kind of bet against them. And I think the price on them to win the game is absolutely fine, around 1.6-ish. I think it's, if anything, there's probably slight value there on the Gunners because their campaign has been so almost flawless, really. But you can get a bit more out of the price by chucking in under 4.5 goals. I think Miguel might differ in terms of my opinion on how the match might play out, but I don't anticipate this being a particularly end-to-end game. I think Arsenal away from home this season have been very, very different to the Arsenal we've seen at the Emirates, where they've been giving up opportunities and chances, and opposition teams have had a fair amount of joy despite Arsenal winning games. They've been a lot more solid and stable away from Emirates, and I'd be surprised if this game featured 5 goals or more. So you can get that around about 1.92, 1.95 in that sort of ballpark, which is a nice increase on the Arsenal just to win the game.
Yeah, it's good combining. We've had a lot of success combining total goals and match results. Miguel, a little bit on Ralph Hasenhüttl. He was under massive pressure a couple of weeks ago, and on the face of it, when I saw that result, I would have said that it's a massive derby win. But given what Marcus touched on there regarding Saints fans still not particularly happy with him despite winning a game, it's never really a good sign.
I mean, this has basically been rumbling for 2.5 years. Not quite actually connected to.
I thought you were going to say 2.5 weeks. So.
I know, yeah. Yeah, but it does feel like Hasenhüttl always goes through these spells. I mean, I think he was my suggestion for the first manager to be sacked this season, partly because of the noise, partly because of results, and I do think some of that is connected to what Southampton have been and what their model has been, which is, I suppose, it's almost constant sales and the constant need then to replenish the squad with younger players, and that isn't always a guarantee. But initially, he overcame it in the summer. Then they basically put full faith into a new team with him. Only, I suppose, to encounter another drop off, because that's what happens with how to describe it. Top bottom half sides, or basically teams in the lower end of mid table that Southampton have been. They're going to be erratic that way. At the very least, there is. We know what Hasenhüttl's style is. Particularly as regards pressing. But that's also why I think this will be a game that will play into Arsenal a bit. Mark's absolutely right in terms of they have a different approach away from home. And I can see this panning out in terms of they catch Southampton once, that sets the template of the game. Arsenal will win and could get a few goals on the break or on transitions.
Yeah, I was sold on Arsenal under 4.5, and that's not a bad. I can see maybe the game playing out that way. I'll stick with the safe option here at Arsenal under 4.5 at 1.95. But Miguel's made a good case that Arsenal potentially late on could catch Southampton out on the break there as well. So we'll lock that in as a bet and move to our final game, which sees Arsenal's North London rivals Spurs at home to Newcastle United. This is the 4:30 game on Sky, and we'll take a look at the betting currently as we have it on Matchbook.com. Spurs can be back to 2.16. Newcastle 3.7, and the same price for the draw, 3.7. Both teams to score yes is 1.72, no is 2.16, and Newcastle are getting half a goal start on the Asian handicap line at 1.78, and that total is 2.5 goals. Miguel, we'll stick to you on this with Tottenham Newcastle. What did you make of Spurs last night? Because I think the fact Conte was digging out results was a massive positive for them all season. You could always point to that, but it just felt that this was a massive, massive game this season, and they just didn't really show up.
Yeah, they looked stale again. I think that's been the case for a few weeks. I mean, we've said it on the podcast. I think the most striking thing about Spurs of late for me is how, even allowing for Conte's pragmatism with certain teams that we probably most saw with Chelsea, this current Spurs are so different to what a Conte team would be, which usually, at the very least, no matter the tactical shape, it's always high intensity, high aggression. We're seeing none of that at the moment. It's a concern. This is something I raised on Twitter. We were talking about Daniel. I've been told, I'm not saying this is a statement of fact, it's been something that's been raised to me by people who know Conte, that they believe that some of the thinking could be because the World Cup is such an unknown this season, but it's pretty much guaranteed that there will be a physical effect after it on a lot of players. Conte has been trying to tailor Spurs' conditioning program, so that means basically physical output now for the first few months, and this is something Pep Guardiola did in the pandemic season, the one that was crunched by a late start and then the Euros being moved. But yeah, so that they're able to kind of, I suppose, produce optimum output in the latter half of the season, when the thinking might be that other teams might be a little bit more affected and they could have an advantage then. They should hope that's true, because at the moment Spurs, as you say, they've been getting results, but the performance has been so unconvincing. I don't think there's actually been a full 90 minutes and they've played well. Even some of their better games have actually come when Conte has responded to something mid-game, like, say, the opening day of the season against Southampton. But it does just feel the one thing you're going to get right now with Spurs is a fairly flat game. With it all dependent on the opposition. And in this case, with the opposition, Howe also has a really good defensive record this season. I think it's only 9 conceded. So this is the big TV game on Sunday, and
we're selling it, lads. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's going to be much of a show. So I've gone for under 2.5. Yeah.
And with the Chelsea United game, it could potentially be unders as well. We're really selling this Premier League weekend, Mark. But you're going to back up a lot of what Miguel was saying there.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is a very difficult game to get a bet that you really want to get behind and support and cheer on. We talk about the entertainment of betting, and it's difficult to find something to really sort of, back with any sort of conviction in this match. But I did think unders at the price was the more appealing of the plays. So I'm not going to mean, putting all eyes on this screen for sure when these two play on Sunday afternoon. But Spurs have been much better at home. Their away performances have been really, really worrying. At home, I think it's 11 wins from 12 recently. And you can look at that price and say Spurs are a very big price. They're around about, about 1.58, I think, when they hosted Newcastle back in April, and they won that game 5-1. To see them now as an odds against shot, that's a massive, massive difference. And a friend of mine reckons Spurs this weekend are one of the best bets of the season, and just because of the price. And I don't necessarily buy into that. What I thought Miguel's touched upon throughout this campaign about Conte and his team perhaps kind of trying to conserve energy. I did a bit of digging actually this week, and actually Spurs are rating inside the bottom 6 for attacking third pressures, which kind of goes to show that they're very happy to sort of sit in, cede possession, and basically play on transitions and counter-attacks, really. They're not generating a huge amount of open play opportunities, but they are one of the best teams in terms of containing opponents, just like Newcastle are. So both teams are very well matched. If you look at their underlying numbers, both going forward and defensively, both very well matched again, very similarly placed in terms of my ratings. So I can see where and why the market is where it is, because Spurs haven't completely convinced at all. And Newcastle have the best defence in the league. They've lost just twice this season. Or once, sorry, I should say. Held United away in a pretty drab game. Held Man City. Should have probably held Liverpool at Anfield as well. So yeah, I think they can possibly go to London and get something out of this game. But I'm just happier sort of cheering on under 2.5 goals here at the price. Newcastle without Isak, who I know has not had a huge amount of time to really sort of make a massive influence on the team, but Sam Maximan's still missing. Spurs without Richarlison and probably Kulusevski again. And Conte just despite all what we're talking about really in terms of conserving energy, Conte just doesn't seem to be rotating his team very much, does he? I don't know how many games now Harry Kane's played, basically the full 90 minutes. So there's bound to be a bit of fatigue and tiredness in the camp. So that obviously doesn't help if you're trying to back an end-to-end shootout here. So quite happy to oppose goals at the prices.
Yeah, I'm fascinated in how that plays out with Conte's potential tactic there post World Cup and all the other teams and how they get on there. We'll lock in under 2.5 goals here, lads, again at 1.96. Very much feeling in under 2.5 ACA this weekend. I fear it may be 3 or 4 days too late, given that obviously all 5 of the games last night were under 2.5. But we'll lock that in as a bet. Full recap here of the bets we've had so far. Under 2.5, as I mentioned, in Spurs Newcastle the same. Chelsea United at 2.02. Palace getting a quarter of a goal head start at 1.76 away to Everton. And we're going to tie in Arsenal on under 4.5 goals away to Southampton. There's a lot of bets going to be coming at you now over the next few minutes. So insights.matchbook.com. You can get a full recap Thursday afternoon. And that's the best place to catch the lads' bets as well. So we will go to our European section, lads, and we'll stick with you, Mark, on this one. You have a couple of selections. And I sent you that stat, and you've touched on the stat in on the podcast several times regarding Union. Union Berlin, sorry, excuse my pronunciation there, but the lowest expected goals in the whole Bundesliga.
Yeah, they did the business for us against Dortmund last weekend. They remain top of the league, 4 points clear. They've won 7 of 10, lost just once. They've beaten Dortmund, beaten Leipzig, held Bayern Munich, kept 4 clean sheets in the last 5. It's a bit of a Cinderella story, really. And it's, puzzling many analytics fans as well, because, as you say, some data firms have Union bottom or close to bottom on expected points. My own ratings make them a bit more towards the mid-table than sort of towards the bottom end. But as I said last week, they're a team who don't necessarily fare well on the underlying numbers because they're an economical team, very efficient, devilishly difficult to beat. They prefer to kind of give you the ball, let you try and break them down and hit you in transitions, utilise counter-attacks, set pieces. They'll outrun you, they'll outmuscle you. They're really a nightmare to play against, really, at the best of times. And I think even money to go away to the team who are bottom of the table in Bochum, a team who are pretty directionless right now, very vulnerable. They've lost 8 times in 10 already. They have taken 4 points off Frankfurt and Cologne in the last 2 matches at home, but both of those games came after Frankfurt and Cologne were involved in European action as well. And Union don't have that same distraction this week. So they have a DFB Pokal game against a lower league opponent, which is at home. So, I'd expect Union to be close to, or if not, full on the best Union we're going to see this season. And they're playing a Bochum team who've conceded multiple goals in 7 of 10, was stuffed 4-1 by Stuttgart last weekend. Don't see any reason why Union can't go there and get a result. They do tend to do most of their best work in Berlin, but even still, we're looking at a team who are 19 points better off than their opposition. And we're only 10 games into the season and you're getting even money on it. So I'm almost just basically ripping up the stats book here in the analytics folder and just backing the best team in the league right now at even money away at the worst team. So just feels like the numbers are probably sort of pushing this price a little bit too big right now.
Yeah, you can see a lot of people questioning why, but the team top of the league are even money. So, but I think you've made a good case there, Mark. We're going to go to Serie A, but we'll go to Miguel first because Miguel's got a Serie A shout here as well. And this is a game I'm really looking forward to this weekend in Serie A. Miguel, take it away. Roma versus Napoli.
Well, this is as much you get because it's a game that I'm absolutely fascinated by. We've spoken about Napoli so much in the Champions League pod. I suppose also there's a bit of an edge to it in that Napoli obviously streaking through Serie A, but Roma, given some doubts and some long-term debate about Jose Mourinho that I myself contributed to, they're still 4th, and it's away to Mourinho's Roma. It's an interesting game in that regard. I mean, I suppose from both perspectives, both as a test of Napoli or another test of Napoli's credentials, or of course they already passed a big one in Milan, but also of where Roma are, given that I suppose Mourinho would be seen as the polar opposite to Spalletti in that way, but yet his defensive record actually it's not stellar in the league. It's one of the better ones among the top half. They haven't scored much, Roma, and I think this. My feeling is that Napoli will do a number on Roma in a high-scoring game. But to lean on the safer side, I'm going for over 2.5, 1.86 here. But as much I think there's so many strands to this match, and it's going to be very entertaining, as much as the clash of styles. But I think that clash of styles will produce more goals.
Yeah, over 2.5 goals, as Miguel says, 1.86. Roma versus Napoli Sunday evening. Serie A, Mark, seems to be the league to be these days. And the narrative around Napoli, unbeaten, obviously they have the Champions League to sell themselves to the wider public. But Atalanta are sneaking about as the other unbeaten side. 2.0 at home to Lazio this weekend.
Yeah, it's a nice price, I think, for a couple of reasons, really. I'm very surprised to see Atalanta doing so well. They seem like a team in transition. A lot of the old guard have moved on, and I looked at their business in the summer, wasn't really inspired, really. It looked like a club that might have gone a bit stale, probably didn't get what they deserved in terms of their performances over the last few years, and I thought maybe it's the time for them to sort of make a change and kind of go a different route. But through 10 games, they're unbeaten. They've taken 4 points off Milan and Roma already, and surprisingly, they boast the second best defensive record in Serie A this season, which is not a statistic you associate with Atalanta under Gianpiero Gasperini. But they're playing Lazio this weekend, who actually have the best defensive record in Serie A this season. So 2 big surprises there, considering we've got Gasperini and Sarri in charge, and 2 teams who have basically been quite notorious over the past couple of years for being involved in really high-scoring end-to-end shootouts, really. But that's where we're at. But I just think the edge is definitely with Atalanta because of the team news, which is Ciro Immobile being absent and injured for Lazio. He is the captain, the leading goal scorer, the penalty taker, the poster boy, the leader, everything basically. He is the embodiment of this Lazio team, and without him, I do think Lazio's quality drops because you're looking at a proposed front three of Felipe Anderson, possibly being a false nine with Pedro and Zarkani either side. All three more than capable of producing magic and producing goals and invention, but nowhere near consistent enough or reliable enough compared to Immobile. And Lazio under Sarri have had an issue when going away to the elite teams in Serie A. They've lost 5 of 9 trips to top half teams last season. And they are actually overperforming if you look at the underlying metrics too. I've got them rated as a mid-table outfit so far on expected points and expected goals. And Atalanta, I think, even money are a nice price. Expect it to go off odds on, and I think Immobile being missing is a big factor with that.
Yeah, there's a couple of even money plays from Mark in the European section and best bet to come. We'll go to you, Miguel, for your best bet. It's Nottingham Forest versus Liverpool, and regular listeners and viewers of both the Champions League and Premier League podcasts will be delighted to see another over 3.5 goals. Mark always touches on the best thing to do in betting is cheer on the overs, and you're taking it to the extreme once again.
Yeah, I've gone for a lot of these this season,
and they've been working.
Yeah. They didn't work last or this midweek, to be fair, because Forest were involved in one of the worst games of the season so far against Brighton. Whether that suggests any sort of change up, I think would be interesting. But given the season so far, given also the hints at a Liverpool resurgence, there's more than this than just 1 or 2 games. There's new resilience about them, which I think will feed into a confidence, even allowing for their injury issues. And I think Liverpool, for all their problems this season, have been capable of really cutting loose against sides that they're obviously superior to. We saw it against Rangers. We saw it against Bournemouth. And I think the same could happen here.
Interesting play. So that's not Forest versus Liverpool, over 3.5 goals, 2.34 currently on Matchbook. And we'll go to you, Mark, for the finale here. It's Mark's best bet. We've been building up to this. It's league on goals. Regular readers of his Matchbook Insights columns will be aware of this, but the trends are saying, and you still believe there's value, and you picked out the Lorient game here, and they've been involved in a number of high-scoring games this season.
Yeah, I've just seen that the price has been on a slight drift to 1.91, which is really quite appealing, actually. Lorient, the big surprise in France this year, just 3 points shy of PSG after 11 games, losing just once, which is incredible, really, for a team who were considered to be relegation candidates at the start of the season. Sold their best player, saw many experienced heads leave, had a bit of a rookie coach come into the club, but he's invested in youth, and they're playing with a fearless attitude right now, which is causing many teams problems. Last weekend's 0-0 against Rams was the first time they failed to score all season. 8 of their previous 10 had gone over. 8 of their previous 10 had seen both teams scoring. They've notched at least twice on 8 occasions. I can absolutely see them getting on the score sheet here at least once, possibly a couple of times, because Troyes just don't keep clean sheets. They have yet to shut out any team, and their 11 games this season are averaging 3.73 goals. They are definitely a team who play fast and loose themselves. So 7 of their 11 games have gone over 3.5, let alone over 2.5, with 9 of 11 seeing both teams scoring. They scored themselves twice or more on 6 occasions too, so they definitely know where the back of the net is. So yeah, as a bottom half team, Troyes are the kind of team you associate with being involved in a gunfight, really. They're more than happy to match you in forward areas, get forward, put you under pressure, and they've got a bit of quality and a bit of stardust in the final third themselves. But ultimately, these 2 teams give up a lot of opportunities too, and despite Lorient being second, they, alongside Troyes, are conceding around 8.5 shots in the box per game on average, which is just far too much, really, if you're going to sustain a challenge for the top 4. So we've got 2 attack-minded teams against 2 teams who defensively are pretty porous and fragile. So I think, in theory, it should spell goals. It should be mentioned that Lorient are missing their leading goal scorer, Terran Moffi. He's injured, but I think there's enough ability elsewhere to sort of mask that absentee. And I think overs and BTTS has paid out in 15 of these 2 teams combined 22 games this season. 17 of those 22 games have featured both teams scoring. So I absolutely can see BTTS in this match. And if you get BTTS, it's not a big reach to get overs either. So yeah, I think 1.91 on over 2.5 goals is a really nice bet there.
Yeah, 12 versus Lorient, over 2.5 goals, and that's, as we said, 1.91 currently. All right, guys, thanks a mil for that. That was brilliant. My thanks to Miguel Delaney, my thanks to Mark O'Haire. We'll be back on the Champions League podcast on Monday with Adrian Clark. As Mark touched on, it's relentless football from now to the World Cup, and then it's relentless football again. Enjoy the weekend's football. We'll see you Monday. Take it easy.